Hi, and welcome back to our series of lessons on the parts of speech. My name is Ganesh, and this lesson is all about pronouns. Now, pronouns are a huge topic. There are many different types of pronouns, and there are a lot of grammar points relating to pronouns. So, in this lesson, we're going to focus on the most important types of pronouns and on how to avoid common mistakes that people make with them. We will start by talking about personal pronouns, then we'll move on to reflexive pronouns, and then we'll look at indefinite pronouns, and finally we'll turn to interrogative pronouns. Now, if these names sound scary, don't worry. By the end of this lesson, you will understand all of them and you'll know how to use them correctly. Before we begin, just remember, if you have any questions at all, just let me know in the comments section below and I'll talk to you there. Okay, so first of all, what is a pronoun? A pronoun is a word that replaces a noun in a sentence. Replaces means it takes the place of a noun. For example, consider these sentences. Corey works with Paige. Corey likes working with Paige. Corey and Paige do many projects together. Of course, that sounds very repetitive because we keep saying Corey and Paige. So can you tell me how you would improve this sentence? Well, you can say, he likes working with her. They do many projects together. That sounds much more natural because we're using the pronouns he, her, and they in the place of nouns. And that type of pronoun, pronouns that talk about people, are called personal pronouns because they refer to persons, even though the pronoun it is considered a personal pronoun. Now, personal pronouns come in three types: subject, object, and possessive pronouns. A subject pronoun is used in the place of a subject in a sentence. For example, in this sentence, I saw Lily yesterday. Here, which is the pronoun? The pronoun is I, and it's a subject pronoun because I do the action. And you can replace that with any other subject pronoun. You can say, we saw Lily yesterday, or he saw Lily yesterday, etc. An object pronoun is used in the object position in a sentence. For example, Lily saw them yesterday. Here, them is an object pronoun, and you could use any other object pronoun in that place. So what do possessive pronouns do? Possessive pronouns show possession. That means they show that you have something. For example, if I said, this is our house, the pronoun our shows that this house belongs to me and my family, for example. I could also say, this house is ours. That means the same thing. Now, all of these, the whole group of personal pronouns, are actually very simple, and I'm sure you use them correctly most of the time. But there are two areas where people commonly make mistakes with them. The first is in using the pronouns I and me. Of course, those are the simplest, but those are also where a very common error occurs. And that is when combining I or me with another noun or a pronoun. For example, we know that Corey and Paige work together. But let's say that Corey wants to say this sentence. I have four options on the screen, and I would like you to tell me which is the correct way to say it. I and Paige work together. Paige and I work together. Me and Paige work together, or Paige and me work together. Which is correct? Well, here we need a subject pronoun, so we cannot use me. Between the first two options, the first option is grammatically correct, but the best way to say this is Paige and I work together. That is because when you put the other person first, it's more respectful, and in English, it's considered more polite. So Paige and I work together is the best way. Now, instead of Paige, you could use any noun. It could even be a plural noun, like the children and I are going to the park, or my friends and I are at the movies, for example. It could even be another pronoun like you and I. Here's another example. The boss gave the project to Corey and Paige. Now let's say that Paige wants to say it this time. On the screen again, there are the four options. Only one of them is correct, and I want you to tell me which is right. Pause the video if you want, think about it, and then play the video again and check. Okay, here we want to use an object pronoun because the noun and pronoun are in the object position, so we need to use me. And once again, the right way to say it is the boss gave the project to Corey and me. We want to put the other person first. The common error in both of these types of sentences is to use one of the other forms. It's very common for students to make that error, so please avoid doing that. Okay, that's one type of mistake. Another type of mistake that students commonly make with personal pronouns is when writing the pronouns ours, yours, and theirs. Remember, I said this house is ours. I could also say this house is yours or this house is theirs. In all of these pronouns, there is no apostrophe before the S. A very common mistake is to put an apostrophe there, and that makes your sentence look ungrammatical and unprofessional if you're writing in a formal situation. So make sure to avoid that error. All right, so those are the two errors with personal pronouns. Let's now move on and talk about reflexive pronouns. Reflexive pronouns are pronouns like myself, yourself, himself, etc. And these are called reflexive because they reflect back to the subject of the sentence. For example, this morning I stood in front of a mirror. What did I see in the mirror? I saw myself. In that sentence, notice that the subject and the object are both the same, I or me. And to show that relationship, we use the ending self. I saw myself. Let me give you another example. I have a friend who likes to think very deeply about things. And when he thinks, he likes to get up and walk around the room and talk. Except he doesn't talk to other people. He talks to himself. Again, the subject and the object are the same person. So where do people make mistakes with these? Well, take a look at these four sentences that you have on the screen. Some of these sentences are wrong, and I want you to tell me which sentences are wrong. Stop the video if you want, read the sentences, think about which are wrong, and then play the video again and check. Okay, actually I tricked you a little bit with that one. All of these sentences are actually wrong. That's because the words ourself, themselves, theirselves, or his self are not real words. They don't exist in English. But many people still use those forms. So the correct way to say these sentences would be to say, we're going to paint the house by ourselves. Students who cheat on exams cheat themselves. My sisters themselves don't recognize me now after all these years. And Jordan bought himself a present for his birthday. Now, the pronouns that you see on the screen are the only reflexive pronouns in English. There are no other reflexive pronouns. So it's a good idea for you to memorize these so that you don't use any wrong forms. So that's one mistake that's very common with reflexive pronouns. The second kind of mistake has to do with myself. Not me, but the pronoun myself. Now take a look at these sentences. Joey and myself are going to give a presentation at the meeting. For more information, please feel free to write to myself anytime. Now, you might even hear a native speaker say these types of sentences, but both of these are actually wrong. Can you say why they're wrong? They're wrong because if you look at them carefully, the subject and the object in these sentences are not the same. When I said, I saw myself in the mirror, the subject and the object were the same. But in these two sentences, that's not the case. So here, you have to remove myself and replace it with the correct subject or object pronoun. So in the first sentence, you have to say, Joey and I are going to give a presentation at the meeting. And what about in the second sentence? For more information, please feel free to write to me at any time. It's that simple. So remember to only use myself or any reflexive form when the subject and the object are the same. Okay, so let's now move on and talk about indefinite pronouns. What do you understand by the word indefinite? It means something like not definite or not sure. And these are words like everybody, someone, something, anything, either, and neither. And these are indefinite because they don't refer to a particular person or a particular thing. Now, the important point here is that all the indefinite pronouns that you see on the screen are singular pronouns. That means with all of them, you have to use singular verbs in the present tense. Okay, on the screen, again, there are some sentences. And in each sentence, I would like you to choose the correct form. Take a moment and stop the video now. Think about your answers and then play the video and check. All right, let's look at the answers. In number 1, there's a party at our place on Saturday night and everybody is welcome. This is because the pronoun everybody is singular. And you might be asking here, wait, how is that possible? Because everybody means all the people. True, but everybody is kind of like saying every single body or every single person. So because we're referring to every single person, the pronoun is singular and you have to use a singular verb. In the same way, in number 2, no one knows the answer to that question. We're talking about no one. In number 3, you look worried. Is something wrong? And number 4 is a little tricky. What it means is that a match happened, let's say a soccer match. 2 teams played, Team A and Team B. Team A did not score a goal, and Team B also did not score a goal. That's what neither means. It means not either. It's the opposite of either. Now this sentence is tricky because you have the word teams before the verb. But remember that the verb in a sentence should agree with the subject of the sentence. And the subject here is not teams, it's neither, which means not either. And because neither is singular, we have to say was. Neither of the 2 teams was able to score a goal. Did you get these right? Okay, this sentence is similar to another sentence that I want to show you. One of my friends, a doctor. How would you fill in that gap? Well, you have to say, one of my friends is a doctor. That's because we're talking about one friend. All of my friends are not doctors. The subject of the sentence is one, so is. Okay, let's now move on and talk about our final type of pronoun, and that is interrogative pronouns. Now, even though this name might sound a little fancy, interrogative pronouns are just the question words who, whom, whose, what, and which. Now, in this lesson, we're going to focus on these two, the difference between what and which, and the difference between who and whom. So first of all, do you know the difference between what and which? Well, it's really easy. What is a general question and which is a specific question. For example, let's say that we go to a restaurant, you and me. Oh, sorry, you and I. Remember that? You and I go to a restaurant. We go to the restaurant and we sit down, and the waiter brings the menu. So you ask me, what do you want to eat? Now you're saying, what do you want to eat? Because the menu has many items and we can choose any item. There are lots of options. But then before I can give my answer, the waiter says, I'm really sorry, it's late and we only have sandwiches and noodles now. So now you turn to me and you know there's only two options. So you say, which do you want to eat? You're saying which because the number of options is limited. We only can eat either sandwiches or noodles. So think of which as kind of like pointing, this or that. In that way, with any situation where there are a small number of options, we use which. For example, with parts of the body, we use which. If someone said to you, there's something in my eye, you would ask, which eye? Not what eye, because there's only two eyes. It's the same with ears, fingers, hands, arms, feet, legs, etc. If I told you, I broke my finger, you would ask me, which finger? Okay? Or let's say you're watching a game with your friends, your favorite sport. You might ask your friends, which team do you think will win? You would ask the same thing if you want to ask about the tournament. Okay? Maybe there are 16 teams or 32 teams, but that's still a limited number. So you would ask, which team do you think will win the cup? So that's the difference between what and which. Let's now turn to who and whom. Now, before I tell you anything, let me just say this. In modern English, it's perfectly okay to use who in all situations. So if you're ever confused about whether to use who or whom in a question, just remember you can use who in any situation and your meaning will be clear. But if you are writing something formal or if you want to use correct grammar, then of course it's important to know the difference. And the difference is this. Who is a subject pronoun and whom is an object pronoun. It's like I and me. Let's take a situation. Helen visited her friend Mabel in the hospital last week. There are two questions on the screen, but I want you to supply the question word in each case. What about the first one? Well, in the first, we know that someone visited Mabel, but we don't know who that person was. That is, we're asking about the subject. For that reason, we use who. Who visited Mabel last week? Or who visited Mabel in the hospital last week? In the next sentence, it's the opposite. We know that Helen visited somebody, and this time we want to ask about that person. That person is in the object position. So, whom did Helen visit in the hospital last week? Did you get both of those right? Now, if you're interested to learn more about this difference, I have a whole lesson dedicated to this topic. You will find the link in the description. You can go and watch it if you like. All right. Now, before we finish, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today. We started with personal pronouns. We discussed two types of common mistakes. The first is when combining the pronouns I or me with a noun or another pronoun. Remember to put the other person first, like Corey and I, Paige and I, or Corey and me, Paige and me, the children and I, and so on. The second type of mistake is using apostrophes with ours, yours, and theirs. Remember, no apostrophes when you write any of these forms. Then we spoke about reflexive pronouns. Do you remember the mistakes that I shared with you? The first type of mistake is to use forms of reflexive pronouns that don't exist. The ones that you see on the screen are the only reflexive pronouns, and it's a good idea for you to memorize these forms so that you don't use any wrong ones. Another common mistake is to overuse myself, thinking that it's more formal. Remember, you can only use myself if I or me is the object of the, is the subject and the object of the sentence. Then we spoke about indefinite pronouns. All the pronouns that you see on the screen are singular, so you have to use singular verbs in the present tense. And finally, we turn to interrogative pronouns. We spoke about the difference between what and which. What is general or broad, but which is more specific. It's kind of like pointing. And then we looked at who and whom. Who is a subject pronoun if you want to ask about the subject of a sentence, and whom is an object pronoun. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Remember to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next lesson.